Hey, Robin Dufour, physical therapist. We are going to talk about rotator cuffs today, and most specifically, when do you need to worry about your rotator cuff and when don't you need to worry about your rotator cuff if you're having a problem with your shoulder or if you have had a problem with your shoulder in the past. And I'm going to give you a really good hint. Not very often do you actually really have to worry terribly about it, but we do have to be active and proactive and understand it and do things to help ourselves with it. So in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about the anatomy, what it is. We're going to do a part 2 where we get more into movements and strengthening, smart movements, smart strengthening mobility. That's going to be part 2. Okay. So part 1, we're going to talk about the 4 muscles that make up the rotator cuff. And we're going to use this anatomy app to do that. We're going to talk about what it actually is, what it does, and what other parts of the body it works well with. And that's every part of the body. Okay. And so also what parts of the body can help heal and keep your rotator cuff strong and not injured, the whole body. Okay. So here we go. Let's take a look at this anatomy app. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to turn this guy around. Okay. And then we're going to remove that top layer of muscle. We remove those traps. All right. And so the rotator cuff is a group of 4 muscles. So we're going to start with this big one that is covers the whole back side of the rotator cuff. Covers the whole backside of the scapula. Sorry, covers the whole backside of the scapula. So this is the that's the infraspinatus. Sorry, I got a little tongue-tied there. All right, that's the infraspinatus. That attaches to this inside border, the border of the scapula that's closest to the spine, and then it covers that whole backside of the scapula. And you can see here it comes and it attaches onto that humerus, that long arm bone. Okay, that's how the rotator cuff muscles work. They attach onto different parts of the scapula, and then they attach onto the long bone, the humerus of the arm. Okay. The next one is this little guy up here, which is the supraspinatus. That just means it's supra, above the spine of the scapula. That attaches here along the top kind of ridgy part of the shoulder blade, the scapula, and it comes over here and it attaches again onto that long bone of the arm. Okay. Next, we have the teres minor. That's this little guy here, and that attaches along the bottom edge of the shoulder blade or the scapula and attaches onto that humerus. Again, that long bone. So you can kind of imagine what those do. All these back here, they help with this external rotation, rotator cuff, external rotation of the shoulder. Okay. And then we have one more that we need to look at. And we're going to turn this guy around, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Okay. And so right here is the subscapularis. Okay. And what that is you can see it, I think you can see it lit up here. What that subscapularis means, it's on the inside part of the shoulder blade. So the shoulder blade sits on the rib cage. Okay. And this subscapularis muscle is the muscle, it lives between the scapula and the ribs. Okay. It attaches to the inside border of the scapula, that part that's closer to the spine, and it comes over here and again attaches onto the long bony humerus. That's how these guys work. And you can see by that orientation that that's going to be a little bit more responsible for some of that internal rotation. Okay. That's why it's called a rotator cuff. Now, I'm going to turn him back around, or her, and I want to just show you a couple things here. Okay. So the rotator cuff, if it's going to have a tear, a micro tear, a partial tear is what you would see if you're reading, if you have an MRI report and you're reading that MRI report, and where those injuries are going to take place in the rotator cuff are where those muscles attach to the humerus. It's where those muscles attach to that long bone of the arm up here in the shoulder, okay? It's not the muscle that's going to be tearing. It's going to be the muscle that all of our muscles turn into tendons on both ends, and those tendons attach to the bones, and they attach one bone to another bone. Like you couldn't have a muscle attaching on just one bone because it wouldn't do anything, right? So they have to attach onto different bones. And so if we're going to have a tear or some kind of irritation or injury, it's going to be here around on that where those tendons attach here. Now, really, really important. I've got rotator cuff tears. I have them on both sides. I don't have the kind that rupture. If you have the kind that rupture, that the tendon actually comes off the bone, we know it. Like we know that is what it's going to be before you get an MRI. If that's a pretty obvious serious injury. That is not the majority of injuries that people have to their rotator cuffs. They're generally more of just a partial tear, a little shredding of the tendon, which sounds bad, but it hurts when it's acutely inflamed. And then if we do it, once that inflammation, because it gets inflamed when there's a interruption, a tear, and our body sends fluid in, and that causes the inflammation, it causes the pain. That will dissipate, okay? Now, the most important thing is that this shoulder blade, okay, is hugely important. And this is a piece that you're not going to see a lot of information about when you're talking about rotator cuff exercises, whether preventative or rehabilitative. You're not going to see a ton of information about the shoulder blade. That's a problem, okay? What the shoulder blade does for the shoulder is everything. All right. So when I'm working with people in the studio, we're always kind of helping to see what's going on with that shoulder blade. And that's going to get us much quicker to the healing and the better strengthening. Now, if you don't have someone right there with you, not everybody does, we can use the whole rest of the body and all these great movements to help facilitate that shoulder blade motion. Now, what doesn't facilitate or encourage that shoulder blade are things, many of the exercise you might see if you Google, or maybe even go to a lot of different physical therapy clinics. A lot of the exercises that you're going to see are going to be kind of static things. I'm going to stop sharing so we can get a little bit bigger on me here. Okay, so a lot of the things that you are going to end up seeing if you're Googling this, or even if you're going into some PT clinics, has a lot of stuff like this, like standing still and doing this kind of motion, maybe with bands, right? You're going to be doing this kind of thing. You're going to be doing this kind of thing, okay? That's okay. It's better than nothing. Okay, but it's not capturing the whole picture, right? So if I'm doing this, I'm not doing anything to encourage that shoulder blade to help me heal this issue or to help me strengthen this issue, okay? So what we need to do more of, and there's going to be a part 2 to this, all right? We need to do more things, and I'll get more into these movements with the part 2. We need to do things where we're reaching down and we're pulling back. We're reaching up and we're pulling back down. We're doing some reciprocal motions like this. We're going to work in some squats and some rotations and some lunges with reaches. We need to tap into the whole body in order to really get that shoulder back to a good place or to keep it in a good place. If we're isolating it all the time, and that's how we're trying to rehab it or keep it stronger, one muscle kind of at a time, that is just not how the body works, right? We don't see Serena Williams hitting a tennis ball like this. It doesn't work that way. She would tear everything in her body if that's all she did. She would, in her shoulder. Wouldn't work. And plus, it wouldn't look very good and it wouldn't be very effective, right? So think about a tennis player. They're moving their bodies like this. They're stepping, they're lunging, they're doing all these things, okay? It all works together. You can see if my hips are going over here and I really want to bring this arm back, I got to get my hips to go with me. I can't just be doing this. that's going to irritate that irritated spot even more. So we can use the body to get that better kind of motion. We're going to talk more about that in part 2. And I'm going to link an article. I'm going to link a research article into the description here in the video. And there are some really interesting studies. Okay. So if you have the one that I'm going to link, it talks about how there's an MRI done of the painful shoulder and the non-painful shoulder. Okay. So usually, always, if you have one painful shoulder, the imaging that's going to be done, if you end up getting imaging, and you don't really always need it, I'm going to be honest with you, you really don't always need it, okay? The imaging is only done on the painful shoulder, the symptomatic side. These things are expensive, right? They're only going to do the one side that hurts. Now, when we have studies that do an MRI on the painful side and the non-painful side, they look the same. Okay. The only times that they look different are about 10% of the time on people who have severe osteoarthritis in that glenohumeral joint, or people who have a rupture, a full thickness tear of those rotator cuff muscles. And that is 10% or less of the people who end up getting an MRI. Okay. Everything else, 90% of the people who are going to get an MRI of both shoulders, one painful, not painful. You're never going to get it on the non-painful unless you're in a study, but there are studies that show this. They look the same, okay? Life wears and tears us. Life frays everything inside our body, right? Our skin wrinkles, we can see that. We can see the changes in our skin as we get older. We can't see the changes underneath our skin. And it's normal wear and tear for those, particularly those rotator cuff muscles, to end up being a little bit frayed, okay? That does not mean that is going to cause you pain, okay? If you're having pain and you end up with an image that shows some fraying or some partial thickness tearing, it's probably newer, okay? And maybe things on this side, the point is, it's very similar to studies that show images for the back, okay? Studies that show images for the hips, painful sides, non-painful sides. You could have someone in excruciating pain in their hip or shoulder, and you could have someone with no pain at all, and they could have an MRI that looks exactly the same. We react very differently. Okay. So if I have 10 different people that have 10 different images that look the same amount of arthritis, same amount of tearing, same amount of this, I'm going to have 10 different people that feel totally different from one another. Okay. What matters is how we feel. What matters is how our bodies move. What matters is how we hold our posture. What matters is how strong or not strong our core is. Okay. How strong or not strong our muscles are, how mobile or not mobile. These are all things we have control over. All right. So I'm going to link that study. We're going to do a part 2 where we're going to go through some thoughtful, logical, smart movements that are good whether you have a problem with your shoulder or not. Okay, that's it for today.